Hello, good evening, friends. God bless you. I was reading Gospel of Mark, chapter 8, and something that I noticed this time that I have never paid attention to, and that is so marvelous, so amazing that I wanted to share with you. The Gospel of Mark, chapter 8, starts with Jesus' amazing miracle about using 7 breads, and he feeds the 4,000 people. And then the disciples collected the leftover in 7 baskets, full baskets. Now, after that incidents, the Pharisees came and asked Jesus for the sign, and Jesus Jesus was like disappointed and said that I'm not going to give you any more sign. And then he gets into the boat and he talks to disciple about the yeast of the Pharisees, to be careful of the yeast of the Pharisees. But during that time, we found that there was one bread in the boat. Now, that surprised me because disciples in the beginning of this chapter 8 gave 7 breads. And then when they are in the boat, there is one more bread, they had it. Now, scripture is not clear where they got this bread. It could be very well possible that they had 8 bread and they gave Jesus 7 bread. And I'm sure that this is not a piece of leftover, because if that is a piece of leftover, scripture would have said that. But it is not talking about the piece of bread. It said they had one bread with them in the boat. And if you read this chapter 8, this miracle happens after 3 days. People were with Jesus for 3 days. And they were in a total wilderness. And Jesus told the disciples that feed them because they might be hungry. They have come from very far places. And disciples said that this is total wilderness. Where we can get the bread? So there was no more bread was baked. There was no way they could have got the bread. So these breads they were carrying, the 7 bread they gave to Jesus and 1 bread we found in the boat. This bread must have been completely dry. If you leave your bread outside in open area, it becomes very stiff and just like stone. You cannot eat them. So after 3 days, when Jesus asked for the bread and they gave the 7 breads to Jesus, it must be totally dry. It must have been totally dry and nobody even can take a bite. It got to be very stiff. And Jesus feed this amazing 7,000 people there. 4,000. I believe that Jesus must not have fed them with this dry bread. I believe that when Jesus took this dry bread, the 7 dry breads were given to him. When he has broken them and give them to feed the people, it must have become soft and fresh. What I'm getting into, the number one thing is that in our lives we find so many things has dried up, just like a dry bread. So many things has dried up. The dreams has dried up. The love for one another has dried up. The relationship we were longing for has dried up. The success we were looking for has dried up. The vision and desires of our lives that we had dried up. And we think that they're dead. It cannot be revived. It cannot bring any freshness into it. But if we give our dry bread to Jesus, he can do amazing things. He may break it, but in breaking those bread, He can revive. He can breathe a new life. So there is a hope. If you are dry bread, if you are broken dreams, if you are dead dreams, then would you please give to Jesus? He may take it. He will take it. He will break it. And He will satisfy your soul. And the second part, if the disciple had 8 bread and they just gave the 7 and they kept 1 for themselves. But the discussion goes in that the boat, the disciples were saying that this 1 bread is not enough. So whatever we are holding back in giving to Jesus, it will remain dry. The bread, the 8th bread, or the 1 bread they had in the boat, will remain dry because we have held it with us. If the disciple would have given that the 1 bread they had in the boat, there must be dry bread. If they would have given to Jesus, He would have bring life to it. And I believe that if you are holding something and you are depending on that one bread, and you know that it is not enough, it has turned dry. So would you let it go and release the dry bread into Jesus' hand and receive the miracle and blessings in your life? I believe that God has blessed you. Thank you.